Hey everyone, my name is Elis and I'm an Icelander living in Canada. So last Saturday, I finally took my English language skill test in order to apply for citizenship, and I thought it was about time I would tell you about my immigration story, because the good people over at TikTok seem to be interested. So I've been eligible to apply for citizenship since 2019, but I've been dragging my feet a little bit because after the whole PR process, I kind of became allergic to paperwork. It also costs money to apply for citizenship. The citizenship application alone is $600, and then you have to take the CELPIP language skill test, and that's another $200 least. In my case, I only had to take the listening and speaking test because I already have PR. For people who are applying for PR, they need to take the listening, speaking, writing, and I think one more thing that I can't remember. And it's even more expensive. And honestly, I think it's a little bit of a money grab. And I thought the test was a little odd at times. And everybody has to take it who is not a Canadian citizen, obviously, because you're applying to become a Canadian citizen. I know a person from Australia, a native English speaker her entire life, and she didn't even get a perfect score. So it's an odd test, but here we are. I should have the results back of this test by the time this video comes out. And I have a snoring dog under the table, so don't mind him. So I will put the test results in my hand unless I failed, which I hope I didn't. Anyway, so I wanted to tell you how I got to Canada. So when I decided to immigrate to Canada, I had actually never been here. And 7 years later, or actually almost 8 now, well, 7.5, this is still my first time in Canada. And I obviously love it. And also kind of can't leave because, pandemic, and before that because I didn't have a passport, and before that you're not really allowed to leave when you're waiting for your permanent residency. Well, you can, but it kind of just screws it up. So I landed in Halifax in September 2013, late September. When I landed there, I swear to God, I felt like I had traveled back in time at least 20 years. It looked so 19s there. And that's not to say the city or Halifax or Nova Scotia is back in time. It was just the airport. When my partner is Canadian, when we got to Halifax, we had to speak to customs separately because I was only there on a visitor's visa. I just applied to stay there as long as I could, which was 6 months. I did not have a return ticket, and I did have most of my belongings with me because I was pretty damn sure I was not gonna go back. And when she was questioning us on why I didn't have a return ticket and why I had applied to be there for 6 months, we told her that I wanted to make sure to see the country, but she was like, I know what's up. So she gave me all the information to apply for permanent residency. We had a connection flight from Halifax to Toronto, and it was very, very tight layover. And I had to be interviewed thoroughly because that was my landing destination. So when you initially get to the country, they kind of do a pre-vetting situation. So I spoke to the initial person, and then I had to go have a short interview with another person. And there was a family of other immigrants already there, a family of 5. So I had to wait to get them all processed. And I was just like, our flight. And then we go to check in for the next flight in the kiosk. And it turns out that my partner wasn't able to check in because he was on a no-flight list because he has the world's most common name ever. So we had to run to a desk to get him checked in because of that. And we had to then run to the gate to get to the next flight. So next up, we got to Toronto. And I was just like, this looks nice, this looks fancy, the airport is super smashing. And I was just like, okay, this country isn't as scary as it seemed in Halifax. And I was just like, yeah, things are looking up. And that time around, we had ample time to wait for our next flight, or 4 hours or so to be precise. And it was not long enough to go into the city, and it was also in the middle of the night. We don't know anyone there, so we didn't have anyone to stay with. And also only 4 hours, so not long enough to go anywhere. Also didn't have a lot of cash or money, so couldn't exactly get a hotel room for 4 hours. So we just decided to have a nap in the airport, which was not easy because they don't exactly have a lot of places where you can take a nap. At that point, the flight from Iceland was about 5 hours to Halifax, and then Halifax to Toronto, and then a 4-hour layover, and then the next flight was to our final destination, which was Calgary, Alberta. All together, the entire flight trip took about 24 hours. I have to say, I was a little bit worried when we landed in Calgary, because I can't say that I'm the biggest country music fan or all that into that lifestyle, and it was blatantly obvious when you got there that it was a cow town, and there were cowboy hats and cowboy boots everywhere I looked, and it's kind of looked what I would imagine that Texas would look like, but I've never been there. But yes, it was definitely little Texas, and I was just like, what the hell have I gotten myself into? That's my best Texan accent. Anyway, we were greeted there by my new in-laws. And then we drove to the farm. So for the first 3 months of my time living in Canada, a new country that I had never been to, a language I couldn't speak. JK. Been fluent in English almost all of my life. So I lived in the middle of nowhere with just my new family that I just met and nowhere I could go. The weather was really nice for a week, and then 2nd of October it snowed. I've never seen so much snow in my entire life, and yes, I know I'm from Iceland, but it does not snow that much there. And also, it does not get that cold in Iceland like it does in Alberta. There was minus 35 with wind chills. It was insane. Apparently, it was the worst or coldest winter that Alberta had had in about 30 years. It was also the first time I heard coyotes, and it freaked me out a little bit because they sound maniacal. Maniacal. A farm in the middle of nowhere, completely dark everywhere, and howling coyotes everywhere. But thankfully, I have incredible in-laws, and they made my stay there really, really wonderful, and I loved being there. And that was also around the time I started watching The Social, because The Social, which is a Canadian talk show, to those who aren't a Canadian, just aired their first season. That's when I started using Twitter to reach out to the show, and it really, The Social is a big part of why it's a big part of my acclimation to the country, and I really connected with the host, and that's how, if you fast forward to 2019, this happened.
Carried away because there's an audience member that I thought was Thor for a second. You're so beautiful. Anyway,
Thor is in the house.
And sorry about that. I literally whispered to him, Thor,
who is actually one of our longest time tweeters and fans of the show.
For real?
So I just want to say a special shout out.
Gosh.
Yeah. And he's got great hair because he's a hairstylist.
Oh my gosh.
Thank you, Twitter.
Lord.
After living on a farm for about 3 months or so, we moved to Red Deer to save up some money so we could eventually move out to BC. We lived with my wonderful favored cousin, Danica, and Red Deer is quite the interesting town. That is my first experience of meeting rednecks, and I mean that in the nicest way possible, because I have made such wonderful friends there, and I have actually gotten more homesick. Actually, I never really get homesick for Iceland, though I miss my family, but I get homesick for Red Deer a lot, and sometimes even wish I would have stayed there. Made some amazing friends in the karaoke club there. Yeah, Red Deer was an interesting experience. Never lived anywhere that had so much crime. It was a little bit scary at times, especially the neighborhood that we lived in. Don't tell my mom, because she would not be happy. If you have a Canadian family member and it's kind of obvious that you're gonna come and immigrate and become permanent resident, it is easy to extend your visitor's visa until you apply for your PR. And then before my second visitor's visa was up, it's when I finally submitted my application for PR. I can't help anyone who's looking to immigrate to Canada without a sponsor, because I got sponsored through my partner. It makes things a little easier in many ways, and it kind of just mostly shortened the process, and it's just a few less hoops that you have to jump through, but good lord was it tedious. So I submit my application in August 2014, and we don't hear anything back in a long time. We eventually move out to British Columbia in October 2014 and wait and hear nothing, and stay at a friend's house out in White Rock that is right by the US border. I had to be careful not to get roaming charges on my phone because we were so close to the border. Then we moved to Burnaby, don't hear anything about the application. And then finally, we find out that the application had been sent back, and we had used the apartment address that we lived in Red Deer, but our cousin had moved out of that apartment, and that apartment had got flooded, so no one had lived there for a while it was being fixed. So my returned application had just been sitting in the postbox for weeks upon weeks. The good thing is when you submit the application, you get an implied status, so you don't have to worry about much, but you can't do anything. You can apply for an open work permit, but that is tedious as well, and I really don't like paperwork. So we finally get the paperwork sent out here and find out a day or so after we had mailed the application of one of the forms that was a one-pager form had gotten updated, and the one we submitted had become out of date, and somehow the post date did not account for that. So it got not denied, just resent to us. So we just had to fill out this one insignificant piece of paper, because that one was basically just some form of signatures and like a lame declaration of something. I can't remember exactly. Anyway, that got all sorted out, so we sent it back, and then I hear nothing. 2015 rolls around the corner, and nothing. And then 2016 rolls around the corner, and nothing. Until December 2016. So I applied in August 2014, and then December 2016, I finally get a letter that says, "We have begun to process your application." Thanks a lot, Harper. But after that, things moved actually very quickly. They processed my application, reviewed it. There seemed to be nothing wrong with it. And the government notified me that I had to have a full physical. And I booked an appointment, got a really nice South African doctor who actually had a daughter-in-law who was Icelandic. And soon as that all got in, so they started processing my application in December 2016. And February 2017, I got notified that I could go in and have my final interview to get my PR status. But that was a little bit of a nerve-wracking experience because in 2014, when I was applying for the PR and filling out the paperwork and photocopying all of my documents, was also the last time that I saw my now expired passport. I was really worried that if I did not bring the passport that I submitted my application with, that it would cause a lot of hassle. But the nice people that I called just said, no worries, just if you get a new one, that's fine. But that's another issue because you have to go to either Ottawa or Manitoba to get a new Icelandic passport. And that's actually quite recent that you were able to do that, because otherwise I would have had to go back to Iceland or to Denmark to get it. And that's a little bit difficult when you've been living on a single income and you don't have a lot of spare change. But thankfully I was able to go to the Icelandic consulate here in Vancouver. She gave me an emergency passport that is valid for a year, and you can only really use it to travel back home. And it's actually like handwritten and it looks fake as it looks like I could have just made it. And when I go into my final interview for my permanent residency, the woman looks at the passport and just goes, oh, I'm just going to update that number. And I had stress for nothing. And so first we have the interview together, and then she asks my partner to step aside, and then she gives me all the details for shelters. If in case you're in a bad relationship, they're very diligent of that. You get interviewed gently if there's anything wrong, because it does happen. People come in here and are stuck with their partners in sponsorship, because when you're sponsoring someone, you're like, it's a huge commitment and you're tied to that person and you're completely dependent on them. Anyway, overall the interview took like 15 minutes and it was surprisingly easy, but it's not like that for everybody. And yeah, so this is a photo of me as a permanent resident. My hair was a little bit shorter, so I could finally start working, finally start making money. We no longer had to live on mashed potatoes and no-name brand products to get by. And in the meantime was the first term of the Justin Trudeau government. He shortened the time that it takes to accumulate days to be eligible to apply for citizenship. And because I had been in the country for so long, before you become permanent resident, your days in the country count as half days. And because I had already been more than 2 years, it counted as a full whole year. A full whole year. And then you only have to be PR for 2 years, as long as you stay in the country. Like if you go visit the States for a day, it's -1 day. And that made me eligible to apply for citizenship in 2019, as I mentioned before. But allergic to paperwork, didn't want to pay the money. And then a global pandemic. I finally got off my ass and got it done. So here I am. So I mentioned the good people at TikTok. I have a little TikTok that minusculely blew up. It's not big. It's only like 25,000 views as of this video. But I think people really interested in hearing about this. So I am gonna talk more about my process of becoming a Canadian citizen as an Icelandic person. And I hope you are happy to have me. And I really can't wait to become a Canadian citizen. I get to be a dual citizen as long as I get accepted with 2 passports. I can't wait until we can then travel again when I get my passport, because I have so many friends down the coast that I can't wait too busy. If you have any more questions about the PR sponsorship process, please leave them down below in the comments and I'll try to get to as many of them as possibly can. Thank you so much for watching. Please make sure to follow me on my social media, especially on TikTok now because it's poppin'. I'll see you next time. Bye.